When
Yeah.
you've got a property that sits vacant for a month, 2 months, 3 months, or longer, and you're paying a property manager or an agent to lease that for you, add that in as another month, vacancy kills you. It's better to keep a tenant in, even if they've got a couple kids, even if they've got a couple pets. If you can get them to stay for 3, 4, 5 years, there's a little more wear and tear on the property, but your vacancy during those years is zero.
Hey everyone, Shaune Corbett here, Real Estate Success, and I have Chris Clary with us. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me on your show, Shaune.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris and I would say go way back, but we actually, ironically, when I, doing these interviews and I'm in our local market, I end up coming across agents that I've worked with before. And Chris and I actually did a transaction a while back. I don't think we yelled or screamed at each other too much. I think it worked. I think it went pretty well. But it was actually it was one of my investment spaces, which is what we're going to talk about today. I had a guy bought the property and ultimately owner financed one and then sold the other one. So that's kind of what he did. And that was the one that he brought a buyer and they were able to secure the deal on. But Chris, I always start with the basics. You are here in Dallas Fort Worth. You've sold a ton of real estate. You've really made a name or specialization in getting into the short term and the long term real estate opportunities. And I know in the real world, we have midterms coming. So maybe we talk about midterms too. Um,
Okay.
We'll talk about politics. You excited about talking about politics?
Politics and religion, right? Let's go.
Yeah. When I started in podcasting, I actually got pretty heavy in those things before I ever got into just doing real estate agents. And since then, it's not quite as exciting when we just talk about selling homes all the time, but you definitely don't get the hate mail. Um,
That's right.
Got to have thick skin for that stuff. Midterms meaning, and you may not do them. We'll talk about that. That means that you've got ones that are maybe they're furnished. You're looking at 4 to 6 month leases, corporate housing, and they're not week to week, not day to day, and they're not 12-month plus, right? So that's that midterms. There's a good market for that in certain areas as well. How'd you get into real estate? Let's start with that.
So it's kind of a long story. My wife and I own several successful businesses, and we started picking up rental properties almost 2 decades ago. I purchased my first condo in Austin with a real estate broker buddy almost 18 years ago. About a year later, we purchased a house in San Antonio. So we bought the first one as a primary, lived there for about a year, bought the next one as a primary, rented the first one. We've done that several times. Over the course of about a decade, we ended up with 16 long-term rentals. Large portion of that here in Dallas, Fort Worth area, about half of them in Austin, one in San Antonio. And one day my wife said, "Hey, we've got 16 rental properties. One of us needs to get a license." And I drew the short straw, I guess you could say. I decided to get my license, and it's been about 8 years ago.
Okay. And you had 16 long-term rentals. You got a license. What made you decide to get a license? Because it's really common, and I'm sure if you've been here long enough, to have investors get into the space. They're like, I get the gist of what we're doing. I've done several. I think I could probably do this myself. I'll get a license and save the commission, right?
Right.
That's that thought. Was that really a triggering opportunity? I mean, 16 is a big number. That's a lot of commission paid out.
That's right.
So yeah, definitely says, hey, we've paid out a couple 100,000 in commission. Maybe we should be getting into buying and doing it under our own commission plan.
Well, part of that came with we had the intention of buying more properties and focusing on the long-term space at the time. Over a span of about 18 months, we purchased three rental properties, each, let's say, around $300,000 or a little bit more. We purchased our primary residence here in Plano. And so, in a span of 18 months, we spent about $2 million in real estate. Multiply that times typical 3%, and that's big money, right?
Sure.
The other aspect of that was we wanted more control over our rental properties. We wanted to list them, especially those locally here in DFW. We wanted to talk to the tenants directly. We wanted to manage them directly. We were still using another broker in Austin who did a phenomenal job to lease our properties down there. But here locally in DFW, the intention at that time was to continue to grow the long-term portfolio, focus here in DFW, and it made sense to get a license.
So let me ask you something. this is a space that I've been in for a long time. I work with investors and they ask me about getting into certain rental properties. What's the ARV? What's the cash flow? What's they ask for all these, technical things. And not all agents really want to be in that space, but the some that do. And one of the opportunities, and a lot of them want to defer all leasing aspects, including property management and finding a tenant. You find the tenants yourself. If you own the property, you manage it yourself. If you have someone that comes to you and you find them a rental property, then you find the tenant, yes, and then you refer them out to management if they want it. Is that the gist?
Exactly. So if they've only got, a handful of properties or less, I tell them, hey, you know what? Don't hire a management company. You're not big enough for that yet. It's really not that much time when you only have a handful of properties. One of the things I'll do is I'll help them lease the property. And there's not a lot of money on the leasing side. Obviously, it's a lot of work. So I even offer to actually help them get it on Zillow themselves and they can deal with it all themselves. Some people still want to hire me and have me handle it. I'll get it on there. It's a lot of time and not a lot of money as a real estate agent and broker to handle leases. I look at it like advertising. I've got my sign in a yard, in a neighborhood. My brand is out there. My name is out there. So although I'm not bringing a lot of income from it, I try to take one on probably every other month. And I look at that as like these are advertising dollars with my sign in a neighborhood. And I'm getting phone calls from hopefully qualified tenants that I can then feed to other agents on my team and other agents not on my team to get closed deals that way.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's something to say about signage for sure. And getting, especially if you're localized. If you've got a listing and you're up in Plano and you've got something out either, Garland or Midlothian, you may not want to run down there and put a sign in the yard as quick. Let's go back to that. So do you feel like Zillow is 80-90% of your opportunity in getting at least?
I would say Zillow is a very high percentage. Obviously, when we put the property in MLS, it'll syndicate out to Realtor.com, Zillow, all the sites. I would say if I was to throw a number out, it's going to be probably 25% MLS driven. And then Zillow is the vast majority of all the websites. I would say I don't want to throw out a percentage, but it is the vast majority of traffic.
I probably lease one out at least once a month, just to
Mhm.
be candid. And it's not a business. I agree with you. It's not something you may not want to do full time, but I've got systems in place that make it pretty turnkey for me. I just, I have an assistant, I have VAs, and they all know what they need to do. So I get it, we'll get it posted. And I'm the same experience. I'm probably, and I even pay the premium on Zillow for the rental manager thing or whatever it is.
Yep.
It blows everyone else away. And you can generally find the tenant directly. Not very often. I rarely have another agent involved. Probably less than 20% of the time do I have an agent involved. I normally can just work it out directly with the tenant. I call them up, I work out terms, and then we just put the plan together and I present to the owner and I give them all the feedback. I talk about all the core elements of it, right? Their rental history, their income, credit, and the background, any evictions. We cover all those things. And then we
Right.
can make a determination if they're a good fit. And if they're not, their credit's a little low, I typically just say, okay, well, we'll just ask for a double deposit.
That's exactly right.
I mean, it's pretty easy, right? Cut your risk. If they have the cash and they have poor credit, well, great. Then we'll just, protect our risk. How do you feel about animals? I'm just asking off the top of your head. Is every owner different, or do you try to encourage all of them to consider them?
Owners are different. When we're going through the leasing process, what I suggest is you want to be pet friendly. During COVID, everyone got a pet, and the vast majority of those pets are dogs.
Yeah.
And some of them are small dogs, mid-sized dogs, large dogs. Obviously, with a pet, you're going to get more wear and tear on the property, especially fences, yards, anything outside is going to get lots of wear and tear. Your front door and your back door, if those are only two doors, obviously luxury homes have more doors, are going to get scratches on them. They can tell you their pet is the best behaved pet in the world, but you put a squirrel behind that back door, and guess what? That
Yeah.
dog's going after it. And so I always tell them, hey, you know what? I like looking at tenants actually, and with pets, and being pet friendly is good, right? Eh, you're not setting yourself apart from too many other properties, but a lot of landlords do not want pets at all. I always look at it like the more people living in the house, let's say you've got a married couple with a couple of kids in elementary school and they've got a couple dogs.
They're just the same, having a lot of kids in there too.
Yeah, that tenant though has a lot of stuff going on, and they're probably going to be a long-term tenant.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, the
true.
more, and that's to what I
It's a
tell my
lot of
vendors.
moving parts to have to uproot in the event that, anything happens, they're more likely to try to stay. So instead of paying the cost of finding a new tenant and having vacancy, just take someone and absorb some of the maintenance costs, right? It's the trade-off.
Yeah, and that's what I tell investors all the time. The thing that I believe kills real estate returns is vacancy.
Oh
When
yeah.
you've got a property that sits vacant for a month, 2 months, 3 months, or longer, and you're paying a property manager or an agent to lease that for you, add that as another month, vacancy kills you. It's better to keep a tenant in, even if they've got a couple kids, even if they've got a couple pets. It's a lot of moving parts. They don't want to move that often. If you can get them to stay for 3, 4, 5 years, there's a little more wear and tear on the property, but your vacancy during those years is zero.
Sure. And I also, it's non-refundable deposits on all animals. I just do non-refundable. If
Yeah.
if you want to bring the pet, no problem. I generally convince all of my owners just go non-refundable. We've got a some type of money against the opportunity, and we get to keep it
Right.
no matter what. So, that's usually a pretty good way to absorb some of that cost as well. Um,
And that's a great suggestion there because that's exactly what I do. Typically with my rental properties, and whenever I'm dealing with a client, I say, let's charge a $500 non-refundable deposit.
okay.
When we started doing that, probably 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, tenants would balk sometimes. Now, when we do that, they don't think twice about it. Everyone's got
I
pets.
no one ever says anything. You're right. I mean, you're right. I'd say probably 5 6 years ago for me, I remember I would have to bring that up. Oh my gosh, it's a small dog. He doesn't do anything wrong. What do you mean a non-refundable? I'm like, they're an animal. I mean, they're going to cause, and it's not your fault. It's just what it is. I mean,
It's
we
what
still
it
got to
is.
cover the shortage. Let's talk about analyzing a deal. I don't want to get too detailed on qualifying everyone. But those are great answers. I'm glad you and I are in that space. We can definitely be on the same page on all that stuff. And I've already stolen a couple things from you. I appreciate that, Chris.
Yeah.
When we're analyzing a deal and we're talking to investors, this is if for agents that are getting in the space, right now is a great opportunity, right? I mean, there are lots of homes available. We can get a good price on a rental property in our market that was very difficult, a few years ago, where the value of the property soared way past the rent
Mhm.
values, right? So that equivalent rent, and I remember because I own a number of properties here, I gained all this equity. All my houses gained 15% equity in 5 years, but they only went up $100 in rent. Like they
That's right.
just didn't chase, the same space. Well, a lot of those values have come down some, and now rent prices have been going up some. So now we're getting close again. So this is a good opportunity for the agents out there that are looking for supplemental opportunities beyond their sphere, beyond, leads coming in, is having conversations. So when we're talking to an investor, and we're looking at analyzing a deal, what strategies do you recommend for agents or investors trying to buy their first home?
So, first rental property or first
Yeah,
home?
the first rental property. Sorry.
So when I'm working with someone, one of the first things I look at is days on market in a neighborhood. So you can have a home at a phenomenal price point with good rents in the neighborhood, but if we run a market analysis and the last 10 rental properties took 4 or 5 months to lease, we're not going to touch that house. So the first thing I look at is days on market. My wife and I like to say on our rental properties, we want a moving truck pulling up as the other moving truck is leaving.
Yeah. As
Um,
close to
it,
that number as you can get.
Absolutely. And there's neighborhoods where rents are strong, prices are a little bit stronger, so your cash flow might be negative even. Even with 20% down, you might still be losing, $100 a month, but you've got a tenant coming in when the other tenant's leaving. So I place a lot of emphasis on days on market because it's not just about getting them in, your tenant in the first time for a year. I like to go back in history and look at last year, the year before. And if I can see that in this neighborhood throughout the last 5 years, 6 years, the trends are 30 days or less, then I know that if this tenant leaves after a year or two, I get another tenant almost immediately. That's far more important to me than trying to make an extra $100 a month in cash flow because I'm reducing my vacancy. Also, it's typically in a more desirable area. It could be location, it could be schools, there could be something else of why that area is so desirable. It could be
Sure.
it's close to Lake Louisville with a view. It doesn't matter. There's a a factor that makes that neighborhood more desirable, which reduces vacancy. So I look at vacancy, I look at days on market first.
Well, and it affects your vacancy, right? I mean, it affects your how long you have to take to renew that lease. And if they have consistent time, that they've consistently stayed in low DOMs, I think that's really critical. I've not really thought about hyper focusing on that. I normally look at the rent values. I do look at DOM. I look at what's active on the market, just
Hmm.
like you do when you're for a flip, right? So I want to know, is the current market now really going to be conducive if we're ready to list in about 90 days to 120 days? We're going to
Right.
know. I kind of think about that for rent, but I don't really think about going back 2, 3 years and start looking at, year over year, what is the traditional DOM on it? If it's short, that means there's a reason people move there and you'll
Right.
fill it in. You'll have low vacancy. I like that. I think
Yeah, a good
that's good.
example is, yeah, a good example is let's say we're purchasing property now, we're getting keys at the end of this month of April. Perfect timing, honestly, to put it on the market in May. I'll look at last summer, the summer before, and see if there's a trend. Have days on market always been low? Is last year, the last few months an anomaly? So I'll break it down seasonally as well, so where I get a really good picture of the desirability of that area.
Yeah. I mean, all you have to do is run quarters for that particular rent time period, and you'll see DOMs. The average is 10 here, 15 here, 20 here, 180 here. Wait. What's going on? And if it's a really good school district, it probably has real high once that fall hits because people have already moved, they've already committed. Let me go to this. We're going to talk about short term after this, but have you gotten into midterm rentals at all? Is that something that you've got any experience in or have investors that have moved into that space?
So I've never personally dabbled in the midterm rentals. The most common ones I see are people who are buying an investment property and they're listing on Airbnb for 30 days plus, or they're working relationships with some type of corporate or insurance claim deal
Yeah.
where if there's, and they'll have a tenant move in for 4 or 5 months because they've had a water claim at their home and they're going to get a much, much, much higher monthly rent than a 12-month lease. And a lot of times those homes are furnished. When you're going after corporate homes, when you're going after the 1 month plus, when you're going after those types of properties, usually that's a furnished home. Even the insurance claim, say if someone's moving in for 4 or 5 months, it's furnished because if they had a flood claim, like we've had a ton of those in the last few years, especially what in 2021, their furniture got flooded too, and they are moving with nothing, and they're waiting 3, 4, 5, 6 months for the house to be complete.
Yeah, and
Um,
to move twice is pretty costly as well. I mean,
yeah,
there's other things. So, and generally, I think 2 times rent's probably a pretty fair, where short term might be 3 times rent if you
right.
could properly do it and keep it leased out. For those out there, he named a few opportunities, right? So, standard long term is typically 12 months plus. There are exceptions, but if you go less, consider raising the rent, right? Giving a little bit of value because you've got to consider the vacancy when that lease comes up. Midterm would be something I like the 90 or the 30-day mark. I think somewhere between the 30 and then even up to 6 months. You're going beyond that, then we're starting to think maybe more long term. But
Right.
I had one in one of my neighborhoods I was renting in Flower Mound, and they wanted like 4,500 a month for it. I'm like, this neighborhood's nowhere near that. And then I realized what they were doing. They left it on the market indefinitely and they would constantly line up leases that were a month, 2 months, 3 months
Yep.
leases, and they just kind of kept doing that. But it was a good looking home. It was furnished, and it was twice the rent that I was
Yeah.
charging. So that's something that could be on the table as well. I've never done one myself. I've just been in real estate long enough. I know enough to get probably dirty with it, but the real opportunity could be short term. And short term's been around now for probably 10, 15 years. It's been pretty hot. And I know it's in a cycle right now. It's probably going down where some of it's getting overly saturated. Everyone saw the opportunities. Hey, we can furnish these things, provide all the toiletries, give them some seasonings and some basic materials. They can just walk right in and start cooking. Those are really good opportunities, especially by bodies of water, but other ones may not be. So talk a little bit about your short-term rental experience.
You nailed it right on you hit the nail on the head when you said bodies of water. So when we look at short-term rentals, we prefer to be in areas where it's difficult to build more homes. You want to be lakefront on water, like you said, beachfront on the water, like you said. And the other market we've bought in consistently have been ski markets. Ski in, ski out are very, very close to ski in, ski out because they're not building more lakes. Yeah, of course, there's like a small one popping up here and there. They're not building more coastline, and there's really no ski resorts getting built. So there's a shortage as the population grows. There's going to be a shortage, which is why you see such good appreciation in those markets. The cash flow might not be as strong in some of those markets, but appreciation has been very strong. We've seen rents come down over the last couple of years. I would say we peaked 2020 through 2022 was kind of the peak for short terms. 23 was a good year. 24 was down. 25 was rough. 26 is going to be rough again. It's what I tell people with short-term rentals is if you're buying your first short-term rental, you're buying your vacation home. Where do you like to vacation with you and your family? Do you go skiing every year? Do you go to Florida, Texas coast? Do you go to the lake a lot? You're buying it as a vacation home for you and your family, and all these tenants are helping pay off the mortgage for you. All these tenants are actually, helping you carry all of your costs. And if they're buying their first investment property as a short term, I say go small. Do something that's manageable because when you're buying a long-term rental, you're buying a sustainable, real asset with long-term tenants. It's very stable. When you're buying a short-term rental, it's a little bit different. You're buying a business,
Yeah,
right? You have to look at short-term rentals as buying a business and running a business. It's a lot more work. Things are breaking because it's furnished. You're dealing with cleaning crews, more repairs, more headaches, more guest complaints. And so the guests of now, of today, after Airbnb took off, 10 years ago and really peaked a couple years ago, the guests now expect a hotel experience. They want everything to be perfect, everything to be perfectly clean, everything to be new. And so you just have to understand that there's a lot more work involved with short-term rentals because it's running a business, right?
for sure. Yeah, there's a lot more moving parts. There's a lot more things that do go wrong. And you certainly have the expectations have definitely been raised. I mean, I'm sure you've stayed in short-term rentals and some did well and some were not delivered what you would have expected it to deliver.
Exactly.
Yeah, we normally go to one or two a year. And just it's just we got four kids. I think what do you have 5 kids?
Four. Yeah. How
You
old are
have
your
four
kids?
kids.
Yeah.
They're all
Yeah.
in elementary school.
Okay.
So I got it's 5, 7, 10, 11, all in elementary school. I think you gave me a couple of them when we were talking on the phone. How old are your kids?
I've got 10, 12, 13, 13. So fifth,
Yeah, that's
sixth,
right. You have
seventh, eighth
twins.
grade.
Yeah.
One's adopted, actually. They're not
Oh, very
twins. So
cool.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
adopted one at the same time you delivered one, or did you adopt them when they were like 3 or 4?
We adopted him whenever he was three, about to turn four.
Okay. Okay.
So, yep, four kiddos. Busy. Life is busy.
We adopted our first, and then we ended up getting pregnant by surprise.
Okay.
And it was actually the third one in my house now. And then the youngest one, we got pregnant again. The second one is actually my niece that we have conservatorship over. So
Okay.
that's how we have all four of them. They all go to the same elementary school, all full time with us. So that's a spaghetti bowl that we've created. But
Yeah.
we love to stay in VRBOs. I hotels, you know what to expect. You've been staying in hotels for years. We all kind of know what it is, and we're not going to go stay in something expensive. It'll be
Yep.
probably a Best Western. It'll probably be um, one of those IHG hotels, things like that. That's the ones we stay in. They have free breakfast. They got a pool. We generally are in, right? We're pretty easy. But the VRBO gives you a home experience, right? And it just creates, something that's not duplicatable. It's a unique experience to that space. So I like that, but there are a lot of moving parts, and that's why it can make you 3 times the long-term rent, or it can make you one time and lots of things go wrong and you end up losing money on it.
That's exactly the case, which is why I tell people when they're buying their first or second, especially the first short-term rental, look at it like you're buying a vacation home. Go to a place you love to vacation in. You know you're going to go there often because you're going to put your eyes on it. And like you said, with the larger family, you want to stay in a home. You want the space, you want the privacy. It's just a better experience whenever you're traveling and staying in a larger short-term rental. Instead of, with four kids like me, you're getting two hotel rooms separate. It's a pain, right? But with the Airbnb world, you're renting someone's home. So when I talk to, and a lot of agents over the last few years have actually purchased short-term rentals. because they like to vacation, they've got some extra income coming in, and they go out and they buy a lake house or a beach house or something in Broken Bow or in Colorado or New Mexico, and it's great. And I tell them the same advice. Start small because you're buying a business and you're learning a new business. You're going to have hiccups, you're going to have hurdles. It's going to be a lot of learning experience your first 6 months of owning that business because you're not just putting a long-term tenant in for 12 months or 24 months. And so start smaller. And I like to tell, investors like, don't just start small. Make sure you've got cash reserves because whenever you close, you're not putting a sign in the yard and getting a long-term tenant in 7 days or 14 days. You've got to get photos, you've got to get new furniture. There's going to be 30 to 60 days of vacancy with a long-term rental, even if it's turnkey. And I've bought 14 of them over the last 6 years, short-term rentals. Even if it's turnkey, there's going to be things that need to be painted, replaced, light fixtures, photos, and then you've got to get on Airbnb and VRBO. And what a lot of people don't realize is when they're getting rent projections, when they get those rent projections in, they're getting rent projections from existing properties. So imagine it's a condo building in Florida. You've got five exact comps, same square footage, same design, same layout, same location. When you're getting those rental comps in, the short-term rental comps in, they're going to say, "Hey, our average revenue over those five condos was X number of dollars." Whenever you go to market and you have no reviews and you're brand new,
Yeah,
you're not
yeah,
going to do that. You
yeah.
have no reviews. The only way you can compete is on price, or else you're going to have a lot of vacancy. So your first year, your rent's going to be a lot less
Hmm.
than with the comp show. And then year two, you've built, your base because now you've got repeat customers, you've got reviews in. It's usually year two or year three that really the short-term revenue increases. A lot of it's due to the reviews you have. A lot of it is repeat customers who vacation in that same destination
Yeah.
every single year.
Yeah, I know. We stay in the same VRBO in Gulf Shores, Alabama, because I got
Yep.
family there every year.
That's
Same unit. It's interesting you say that because when I'm shopping VRBOs and stuff like that, I realize if it doesn't have reviews, yeah, I wouldn't pay market rent for it.
right.
No one has any feedback on if they're delivering, and that it does make a big difference. Plus, that's you would search by that. You want to search by people that are at least four, 4.5 or better.
That's
If
right.
you're dropping below that, it's a murder on your income for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I tell people your first five guests, you've got to follow up with those people constantly to give you 5 stars. A
Yeah.
lot of people don't want to hustle for those reviews, but you have to
Yeah, even pay
because
them, right? You can even say, "Hey, I'll give you $50. Give me a review."
in Airbnb and VRBO might frown on that, but you've got to do what you got to do to get your first five reviews in because a
Sure.
lot of families, especially people with young kids, will not book an Airbnb that is brand new on the market. There's no trust there. There's no previous reviews. So you've got to compete on price and you've got to really, and you need to let those people know. And this is, we coach people on this all the time is you've got to let that first guest that's staying there know that they're the first guest and make it seem fun and exciting. They're going to be a lot more forgiving if you're upfront with them and say, "Hey, you know what? You're my first guest. We're kind of nervous for staying there. We love this." Let's say in Gulf Shores, we love Gulf Shores. We've got family there. We go every year. We bought our place. You're our first guest. And this is our home away from home. And we really want you to have the best experience possible. If there's anything we can do, please let me know. Because if you don't do that and something goes wrong, the toaster doesn't work or the microwave or whatever, they're going to leave a 3 or 4 star review. So you got to kind of get in front of that for your first 5 to 10 guests and just get in front of that and say, "Hey, you're my first guest. I would really appreciate it if I kind of have constant feedback from you because, and you don't even have to give them money or a gift card. Sometimes just say, "Hey, I'd love to give you an extra night. If you drove in, like Gold Shores, a lot of people drive there. We'd love to give you, you're staying Thursday to Monday. We would love for you to check in early and check out late or stay an extra night for free for, helping us with our new business?"
Yeah, those are easy things that you could do because you're going to have a gap probably anyway before the
Yep.
next one since it's so new.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
let's talk briefly about syndications. I don't know if agents are going to get into that space, but you're talking about if I wanted to go from smaller investments to multifamily or larger.
Mhm.
Syndications is a way I can actually give money towards something where you can multiply your opportunity and you can get into, not quadplexes, but multifamily and bigger scenarios where it might be, 2, 3, 4 million plus.
Right.
Talk a little bit about syndications. Is that something that you have your investors get into, and how does an agent benefit from that?
So for agents, a lot of agents are wanting to get into real estate investing, but they don't have the ability to go out and put 25% down on a long-term rental or equivalent down on a short-term rental.
Sure.
So a lot of agents, especially in DFW, are taking part where they're either going in something small and buying a couple quads, 10 unit apartment complexes, or even multi-hundred unit apartment complexes. And so we just wanted to kind of contrast the difference. Whereas with your long-term rental that you own, you have almost complete control over that property when you're self-managing. With a short-term rental, you've got a little bit less control because now you've got a cleaning service involved. There's always maintenance man there. You've always got things happening. So you have control, but the way it's marketed on Airbnb, VRBO with the reviews, you lose a lot of control. There's more work. With a syndication, there's even less control. You're one of 100 investors buying a multi-hundred unit apartment complex. Your percentage of the down payment, you are relinquishing complete control of your money. But because this show is geared towards agents, a lot of them classify themselves as real estate professionals to the IRS. And obviously, they need to talk to their CPA on how this works because the real estate agents, if they meet the IRS criteria, they can depreciate that long-term rental over 27 and a half years. Commercial properties over, what is it, 37 and a half years. They can also take the deductions from the syndication against their active income. So if they put, let's say they don't have enough money to buy their own rental property, they can invest in a syndication, get the tax loss, harvest that tax loss against their active income. And obviously they need to talk to their CPA about it, right? And they need to do everything correctly, but they can actually take that off of their income as a deduction for the depreciation or a loss. So
Mm.
it's a powerful tool, especially for those agents and investors who aren't big enough yet, who are looking for cash flow, who want to invest in real estate, who understand the real estate game, but they just don't have enough money to go out and don't put 10% down on a long-term rental. You can, but the numbers aren't going to be great until they hit the number where they can invest and buy something. It's a
Sure.
good way to get started.
And most of them I think have exits on them, like 5, 7 years
Correct.
or something like that on these syndications. So it's not, hey, we're stuck until they sell the building.
Mhm.
It's they have ways that you can get your portion bought out too. Some of the other ones might really like the investment and they'll offer to buy you out based on where you are and how much you have invested in it at that point. Um,
Exactly.
what is there a difference in the way that agents should approach working with investor clients versus traditional buyers? This might go without saying, but it's just good to kind of like think about it and I forget to tell this language to agents, but right. So if you're working with someone that's emotionally driven versus someone that's, financially driven, they're different types of scenarios. So talk a little bit about that.
When you're dealing with a typical buyer family who's buying a home, they're buying because they want to be in that school district, proximity to work, their parents live in the neighborhood. There's another reason, right? There's an emotional reason why they want to be there. They love the countertops or the layout or the pool area. There's emotional attachment to the home when you're buying a primary residence. We've probably both experienced that when we bought our primary residences, right?
Sure.
It was less about can I get the best deal that I can get to I want to be in this home in this neighborhood in this area. I feel like this is the best place to raise my family. Investors are completely different. It is a math problem. One of the lenders I work with quite a bit, he just calls it's a math problem. We've just got to solve the math problem. Okay, what's my rental income on it? What's my expenses? What's my days on market? Does this make sense as an investment property? And when you're dealing with investors, you have to approach it a little bit differently because they are looking at it as a business, as a math problem. Is this thing going to make me cash flow? You have some cash flow investors. You'll have other investors who aren't concerned about cash flow, and I call them net worth players. They're looking, They're high net worth individuals. They've got businesses, investments, stock portfolios, and they're getting into real estate to diversify their global cash flow, their total asset picture. They might not be as concerned about a couple $100 a month of cash flow. But when you're dealing with an investor, usually that investor is going to end up buying more than one investment property. So you want to position yourself where you are a trusted resource for all the information and not just opening up the doors and doing CMAs and negotiation. But when they use an agent, they want to know who your contractors are, who your flooring guys are, electricians, plumbers, tree trimmers. They want your whole Rolodex. When you're dealing with an investor, they're using you because they are using your entire team. And usually, if you do a good job, you're talking some investors will buy two, three, four, five properties from you. And I found that even on the primary residential leads that I get, referrals, a lot of those are driven by my investor clients. When I get an investor client text message me, sometimes it's because they're real estate minded, right? These real estate investors are talking about real estate, buying real estate, talking to their friends at a dinner party or at kids' soccer or wherever about real estate because they're an investor. They're out there actively having conversations about real estate every day. So those investor clients sometimes turn into your biggest referral sources because they are always talking about real estate. And inevitably, people ask, who do you use? And you want the answer to be you or me,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely 100%. Right. And if you can do it right, you can do far more on investor clients than you can with individuals because they're going to buy every year versus every 7 years.
Right.
And yes, the emotional referrals are great, but I would rather investor clients put me in touch with other investor type clients. I jokingly sold a number of homes on text only, never saw the home, never negotiated anything because they already had the price. It's off market,
Right.
right? It's different. Everything was worked out and they just closed on it a week later. And we both, I mean, they clean it up and then I put a tenant in there and we're all through text. Don't
That's
even need
right.
to have a conversation. So it can be pretty turnkey if you get efficient at it. So that's been a pretty cool benefit that I've been able to benefit from.
Yeah, I've had investors from other states buy properties sight
Sight
unseen
unseen, yeah,
who have investors from other states who've never been to the state of Texas before. They've got rental properties in other areas around the country. They hear that DFW, Houston, Austin, San Antonio are growing markets,
yeah,
and it's in their strategy. Hey, I'm going to grab a couple properties in DFW, and they want to work with someone with reputation and experience because they're leaning heavily on you as the agent. They're leaning heavily on me for your expertise, for my expertise, for our knowledge,
sure.
which is why I've had a number of those New York, California, Florida type people who don't see the property sometimes ever or until after they close. And I've done the same. Californians and New Yorkers are buying here. Texans are buying in Colorado. Obviously, everybody knows that. New Mexico, Oklahoma, and in other states. And my wife and I have done that. We have bought sight unseen in New Mexico and Missouri. Saw a Zillow listing, called the listing agent, bought the home, and didn't see either one until after we had closed. And so it's very common when you're dealing with investors, especially like I have a good sized portfolio, even though we've been unloading some recently over the last few years. We had about 24, 25 a few years ago, and I've bought and sold about 40 total. But with seasoned investors, they're not afraid to buy sight unseen. They're not afraid to buy sight unseen another state away or two states away even. As a agent, you've just got to be really comfortable. Let's FaceTime that property. Let's FaceTime the neighborhood and go through the right process with your client to make them more likely to buy the property, right? They're leaning on you because they're looking at all your numbers, all your comps, all the data. And so you have to be very data driven again because it's a math problem, but also, hey, this is the area. And then what I like to do too is just I like to literally put them on FaceTime on my cell phone and say, I'm going to take you on a neighborhood tour. Not just the house. I want you to see what's going on. And
Sure.
I've even had some say, hey, where's the nearest grocery store? Can you drive by and FaceTime me? Because they're not coming to Texas, right? Some of them don't come here even
Well,
after they.
it wouldn't be cost effective for them to fly out here, time wise, and the cost and all that.
Exactly.
And here's it's an important point, right? So everyone has a different risk tolerance. You
Exactly.
know, Chris, you know people that they don't want to leave their city to own a rental. They're not about to go own a rental in Austin.
Right.
They can't even imagine that. I've bought I've bought and flipped personally on my own name, probably about 50 houses.
Hmm.
And I bet at least half of them I've never seen. But I knew what I needed to know in order to make the deal work. And I'm the one that's going to sell it. So I bought it and I sold it, and other people did all the rehab. But I have a really high risk tolerance. I wouldn't be opposed to buying a rental property in another state. I'm trying to work out one right now in Alabama.
Yeah.
But not everyone has that.
Right.
And being able to buy something sight unseen would just, it's kind of like making an offer on a home without an inspection. How about that scary one?
But
Chris, if I go low enough on the price, I can offset probably 90% of the maintenance deferment
right.
unless I've got an issue with the core elements, right? HVAC, roof, foundation, water heater, some of the more expensive things. If those are clearly good, then we're only dealing on most houses under 500,000, probably around 5 to 7,000 at worst on deferred maintenance,
Right.
meaning the house isn't going to fall apart. Someone's living there, but that's the risk. And then you make an offer 10,000 under, we'll waive the option period. The buyer will come out ahead. And most people can't swallow that.
For sure.
They get so consumed with, oh my gosh, we got to protect them. I've done, 500 transactions. I've almost never had it where they come back and we have an issue that wasn't flagged, and it was so costly that it wasn't worth it, you
Right.
know. But I know Trek and everyone else is always about, hey, make sure you protect them, put all these things in place. You're hurting your buyer sometimes when you get ahead of it and you over liability it.
Oh, no, for sure. And so it depends on that buyer's risk tolerance. For
Sure.
example, when I did that in New Mexico, we bought cash, sight unseen, didn't get the house inspected. Whenever you're doing that as an investor, and usually it's seasoned investors that are doing that and buying
Yeah.
sight unseen, it's like it's the equivalent of buying at the courthouse steps. And whenever they're having those auctions
Yeah. You don't
and
get to see the house, you just get numbers.
yeah, you just get numbers, right? And that's why I tell people, kind of going back to what I mentioned earlier, is when people are buying their first short-term rental, I say you're buying a vacation home and your tenant's helping you pay off the mortgage. Buy something you love that you're going to use, because if the numbers don't go your way and the numbers come in lower, which they will first year or two until you get reviews in, you don't want to lose sleep at night. You still love that home. When you're
Sure.
buying a long-term rental, we'll crunch all the numbers, run all the math, and for a lot of investors buying their first one or two, I recommend the same thing. Let's stay small, let's stay close. On the other side of that spectrum is your investors who are buying sight unseen everywhere, and they're at a different level of savviness because we're going through all that. Okay, what's worst case scenario on this house? Okay, XYZ. You're looking at it almost like when you're running the numbers as a wholesaler in a sense. We know that our ARV is this number, and we hope to get surprised on the good end. So it's just two different types of investors. One's a little bit smaller or brand new, and the other one is someone that may have been doing this for, like yourself and myself, 10 years, 20 years, done this dozens of times. And it's not just a part of our business. And you always budget in your numbers for there to be some type of repair, an issue, some type of variance to affect your numbers.
Sure. And they're always there. Something will come up because it's built by humans, and
That's
a lot.
right.
We got,
Good way
all
to
right.
put
Well,
it.
we got to wrap it up. You were amazing. We can find you on social media, Team Clary.
Yes.
That's the way you market
Team
yourself
Claire,
as?
yeah. Team Claire Realty is the name of the brokerage, if people want to Google that. Yeah, I'm on Instagram too. It's Sell Homes Sea World is the name, or Facebook, and anybody can feel free to add me to Facebook, LinkedIn, anything. So, and the listeners, viewers can feel free to reach out and ask me any questions.
Yeah. Well, you've been very open with me, and I appreciate that doing in the podcast and on the phone. For any of you want more information with Chris Clary, we'll provide the information down below in the YouTube channel. And for those of you who enjoyed Real Estate Success with Shaune Corbett, please subscribe. I'm going to continue to have every week a new interview and something to share with all of you. Until next time, have a high performance week. Thank you. That wraps up another episode of Real Estate Success DFW. I hope you're leaving with new insights that push your real estate career forward. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with fellow agents who's ready to succeed. And if you're interested in working together or have any questions, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out to me directly. My personal phone is 214-228-0383. Let's connect and make real estate success happen together. Until next time, keep pushing forward. I'm Shaune Corbett, and this is the Real Estate Success Recovery. Have a high performance